Great. Thank you so much. Is this mic at a good volume and all? We're here? Excellent. Thank you. I'm very grateful for this community today to honor, to grieve, and to celebrate the life and gift of Toni Morrison. She was an extraordinary person who made an immeasurable contribution to Black and Black feminist letters, to literary criticism, and to our collective spirit. I was reminded, I've seen this video a few times, helped put it together, but you know, the way she can say something like, as though our lives have no meaning, et cetera, et cetera. You know, it's not simply what she thought, it's how she could convey it. So when I heard about her passing, I mean, of course I was shocked, but my first gut, first of all, was to call Akua Naru, but that's a different story. And then the second thing was I had to do something. I felt we should rejoin this semester with some kind of collective honoring, that we shouldn't just let it pass and wonder come Christmas, wow, you know, wasn't that terrible, and not pay attention to what the experience was like. And I didn't want to do something just alone or with my husband or with close friends. I wanted to bring the community into being. And so this event is intended to create a gathering where some of our most creative and insightful colleagues at Brown have an opportunity to celebrate her. There are many more people who could easily be here, and we're hoping some people in the audience will participate in our conversation and the folk thought. But this, I also hope that what we do here embodies the power of the collective to heal itself and to hold close between us the lessons that she has given us. So we have something very informal planned where each of us will speak for 5 minutes in the order of our seating. I will read one presentation by someone who couldn't make it. Then we have a performance by Akua Naru and a folk thought with the audience led by Elmo Terry Morgan, and a reception in the lobby. And so I turn the mic over now to Lisa Biggs. Thank you.
This is an excerpt of her speech accepting the Nobel Prize for Literature, delivered on the 7th of December, 1993. Once upon a time, there was an old woman, blind, wise. In the version I know, the woman is the daughter of slaves, Black, American, and lives alone in a small house outside of town. Her reputation for wisdom is without peer and without question. Among her people, she is both the law and its transgression. The honor she is paid and the awe in which she is held reach beyond her neighborhood to places far away, to the city, where the intelligence of rural prophets is the source of much amusement. One day, the woman is visited by some young people who seem to be bent on disapproving her clairvoyance and showing her up for the fraud they believe she is. Their plan is simple. They enter her house and ask one question, the answer to which rides solely on her difference from them, a difference they regard as a profound disability, her blindness. They stand before her, and one of them says, "O woman, I hold in my hand a bird. Tell me whether it is living or dead." She does not answer, and the question is repeated. Is the bird I am holding living or dead? Still, she does not answer. She is blind and cannot see her visitors, let alone what is in their hands. She does not know their color, gender, or homeland. She only knows their motive. The old woman's silence is so long, the young people have trouble holding their laughter. Finally, she speaks, and her voice is soft but stern. "I don't know," she says. "I don't know whether the bird you are holding is dead or alive. But what I do know is that it is in your hands. It is in your hands." Her answer can be taken to mean, if it is dead, you have either found it that way or you have killed it. If it is alive, you can still kill it. Whether it is to stay alive is your decision. Whatever the case, It is your responsibility. For parading their power and her helplessness, the young visitors are reprimanded, told they are responsible not only for the act of mockery, but also for the small bundle of life sacrificed to achieve its aims. The blind woman shifts attention away from assertions of power to the instrument through which that power is asserted, through which it is exercised. Language is a system. It is an act of consequences. Statist language censors and can be censoring. It can be ruthless in its policing duties. It has no desire or purpose other than to maintain the free range of its own narcotic narcissism, its own exclusivity and dominance. However moribund, it is not without effect, for it actively thwarts the intellect, stalls the conscience, suppresses human potential. Unreceptive to interrogation, it cannot form or tolerate new ideas, shape other thoughts, tell other story, fill baffling silences. Official language, smitheried to sanction ignorance and preserve privilege, is a suit of armor, polished to shocking glitter, a husk from which the night departed long ago. In her country, children have bitten their tongues off and used bullets instead to iterate the void of speechlessness, of disabled and disabling language, of language adults have abandoned altogether as a device for grappling with meaning, providing guidance, or expressing love. But she knows tongue suicide is not only the choice of children, it is common among the infantile heads of state and power merchants whose evacuated language leaves them with no access to what is left of their human sentiments, their human instincts, for they speak only to those who obey or in order to force obedience. The vitality of language lies in its ability to limn the actual, imagined, and possible lives of its speakers, readers, and writers. It arcs toward the place where meaning may lie. Its force, its felicity, is in its reach toward the inevitable. We die. That may be the meaning of life, but we do language. That may be the measure of our lives. I'll fly away, oh darling, I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Colin. I teach in the Department of Literary Arts. As such, I should warn you, I might be digressive, but I promise to be brief. Many years ago, maybe 1991, I had to face a moment in life where I was going to be blind. The truth is that, without very specialized contact lenses, I'm legally blind. And from here to where you're sitting, without my lenses, I would not know if you were there. I was born in Jamaica, and I had a congenital disease. My corneas were becoming steeply coned, and it wasn't diagnosed until I immigrated to America. And in 1991 or so, I had surgery. I was living in Atlanta. My eyes became infected. And for 3 months, I couldn't see at all. It was at that time that I decided that I would be a writer. And I made a kind of childish bargain with God that if you would allow me to see, I would do the thing that I've wanted to do but haven't really made myself do, which is to write books. maybe about 2.5 months into my recovery, I could see a little bit. And I had a visit with the doctor, and he said, listen, I want an assurance from you that you're not looking at anything closely or trying to. But I needed so badly to read. I lived by myself in a house with maybe 5,000 books. And I asked a friend to find a book for me. I said, I'll read anything you give me. My friend gave me a copy of Sula. I read it, and it hurt. It hurt the eyes, it hurt the soul, but it was also leavening. Because in a moment of pain, in a moment of wondering what I would do with my life, I was given direction from a book. I moved back to New York to write a book. And I did so with the kind of obscene optimism of the immigrant. I would just go back to New York and write a book because that's what people in New York do. They write books. And I moved back with my mother, and my mother is a good Jamaican woman, a pharmacist, kind of person who said, I just don't understand people who get bachelors of arts. That's not a profession. They moved in with her. But she was also a woman, and still is, of great comfort. And she said, if you want to do this writing thing, you can do it. But if you're living in my house, you have to work. I said, good. And so I got a job at an ad agency. As I said, I will be digressive, but I promise to be brief. And I had a friend by the name of Patrick, and he lived on East 90th Street. He said I could write at his place all day as long as I wrote all day. And I said I would write all day. Got a little job at an ad agency, 7 in the morning till noon. As a proofreader. You see, because I had my specialized contact lenses, I could see lots of stuff. And one day going to Patrick's, and it might have been the first time I was going there seriously to write, I was at Grand Central Station. And as you might have probably gotten, I like to make these ridiculous bargains. And I said, you know what? Maybe if I got some sort of sign, it would mean that maybe I should do this thing. And they still had token booths those days, and I went. And in front of me was a tall gentleman who had one of those accents that no longer exist in America. It was George Plimpton, the sort of playboy writer. Says, my God, George Plimpton, my God, I'm buying a token behind George Plimpton, my God, this is my sign. So I took the train up to 59th Street. The reason I went to 59th Street is that I had a friend called George who worked in the cafe at Bloomingdale's. And I could afford a token each way, but I couldn't afford lunch. And George let his friends who worked in the cafe know that, I have a friend called Colin. He comes by, he'll sit at the counter, he'll read, and if you offer him a coffee, he won't say no. If you put a biscuit on the side, he'll take it too. And I had my coffee, and I decided to walk to my friend Patrick's place on 59th Street. From 59th Street, he lived on 90th. And I was crossing 3rd Avenue. And it was about maybe 2 in the afternoon. It's fairly crowded. And as I was crossing the street, something happened. I saw walking the other way a woman with silver dreadlocks. It's about that tall. Rocking. And I looked at her in a kind of awe-filled way, the way that I'm sure that someone in a canoe centuries before would have seen a Spanish galleon. A certain kind of weight to it, a certain kind of power to it. And it was Toni Morrison, just going about her business. Now, I had made my decision. I was looking for a sign. I thought my sign was George Plimpton. And here comes Toni Morrison to mash up my sign. I was frightened. Again, when you're a literary canoe in the presence of a galleon, you're concerned about the power of the wake. And I felt the trembling in me, and she moved by. And I turned, followed her with my eyes, and it was as if every single person who was crossing that street, whether they knew her or not, knew to get out of the way. And I stopped in the crosswalk. Horns began to blow. And I realized horns were blowing on reflection because I was completely transfixed. And I thought about all the books of hers that I'd read, and the horns kept blowing. And I thought about what it means to have permission to do something. And how very often that permission is not one given in comfort, but it is given in a kind of tremendous, delightful fear. That when you're in the presence of bigness, you feel inside you something beginning to trigger. And I remember going up to my friend Patrick's place, and I wrote about 30 pages longhand, none of which was good. But being in the presence of Toni Morrison that day, for a brief moment, it couldn't have lasted more than 5-10 seconds, I had a redoubling of purpose. And in the years to come, I would read and reread her work again. Years later, when I was a true grown-up, I had the opportunity of spending some time with Rita Marley, the widow of Bob Marley. And in many ways, the person who made Bob Marley aware of his potentiality as a songwriter. And I told her the story. She was telling a story of when she saw Haile Selassie arriving in Jamaica in 1966 and what that did. And it's a very interesting story because I told her my story about seeing Toni Morrison. And she said, you know, I only know Bob to read one novel, and it was by that guy, Tony. I never told her the truth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colin. These are some written remarks prepared by Anne duCille, Professor Emerita and a great friend who wanted to come but could not make it. It's entitled Voluptuous, Notes on Toni Morrison. You haven't lived, or maybe died, until you answer your phone to find Toni Morrison on the other end of the line and have to struggle to hold up your part of an intelligent conversation while trying not to faint or giggle like the groupie you are. Although I did eventually have the great honor of getting to know her personally, enjoying her wit, humor, and generosity, like much of the literate world, I first met the magnificent Toni Morrison through her writing, specifically her inaugural novel, The Bluest Eye, published in 1970. I was at that time an earnest undergraduate English major studying mostly dead white men, as was the canon and the custom in the dark ages of the academy of yesteryear. Not that Black women hadn't written novels before, but books have a way of becoming what culture keepers consider to have taste claim they are. And for decades, the work of Black women had been disparaged as sentimental, lace curtain romances, and dismissed as incompetent, irrelevant, and immaterial by a critterati that was largely white and mostly male. The Bluest Eye, appearing, it's important to note, the year as Alice Walker's first novel, The Third Life of Grange Copeland, changed all that, with Morrison spearheading a seismic reshuffling of what had been a stacked deck. No critic could call The Bluest Eye sentimental or romantic. Here was a novel that defied known forms, invented new grammars, upset, inverted, and subverted traditional structures and narrative strategies. The novel, unbound, blackened, feminized, repopulated, and unpunctuated. Tolstoy opened Anna Karenina with the now famous line, "All happy families are alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way." But Morrison, mocking the grade school primer at the bedrock of the American educational system, wrote, "Here is the house, it is green and white, it has a red door, it is very pretty. Here is the family, mother, father, Dick and Jane, live in the green and white house, they are very happy." Appearing on the page, unpunctuated and in increasingly small and jammed print, graphically foreshadowing familial dysfunction and the tragic descent into madness the novel recounts. Never had an opening line said so much about the declining human condition, almost without uttering a word. Quiet as it's kept, there were no marigolds in the fall of 1941. Because she would insist on saying so herself, I feel obliged to point out that, brilliant and wise as she was with words, Toni Morrison was no solitary genius in a vacuum. She was part of a tradition of Black women writing of, for, and about their community. The flowering of fiction she seeded that would be called Black feminist, though Morrison herself claimed neither the term nor the politics, was more than a renaissance. It was a revolution that brought to the front lines of literary studies daring new themes, theories, characters, and narrative techniques that helped change not only the nature of the novel and the composition of the canon, but also the gender, color, and contours of the university itself. As African American women, enabled, inspired, and emboldened by the civil rights, Black power, and women's movements, stormed the halls of the academy to professors and students no longer content merely to teach and study great white men, but determined instead to cultivate their own Black female gardens. In addition to her own novel contribution to American and African American letters, Morrison, as an editor at Random House, published the work and guided the careers of a number of Black writers, many of them young women whose first books she brought into print, including Angela Davis, Toni Cade Bambara, and Gail Jones. It's been said that Toni Morrison wasn't just a Black editor, she was the Black editor. She was a hands-on street fighter kind of advocate for Black voices and books she believed the world needed to know, from Muhammad Ali's autobiography, The Greatest, to the poetry and prose of Henry Dumas, which she fought to publish posthumously and which the world otherwise might have never known. The extent to which Morrison helped shape African American cultural production and helped direct the course of both Black and women's studies as emerging fields in the 70s and 80s is perhaps best captured in the cultural contours of one of her most significant editorial credits with Random House, The Black Book, a compendium of art, artifacts, photographic images, and historical documents that charts and chronicles the Black experience in the so-called New World, originally published in 1974 against great odds and reissued in 2009 in a luxurious 35th anniversary edition. On a personal level, Morrison's Missing Marigolds and Alice Walker's Revolutionary Petunia also changed the course of my own life in letters. I'm here today because of them. Growing up in the 50s and 60s, I had always said I wanted to be a lawyer like Perry Mason or a physician like Dr. Kildare, but my secret wish was to be a writer, and it was that desire, or delusion, to author the great American novel that first brought me to Brown nearly 50 years ago as a graduate student in the creative writing program, where Gail Jones was my classmate and friend. Talk about establishing a curve. In awarding Morrison the Nobel Prize for Literature in '93, the Swedish Academy described her writing as a kind of lustrous poetry that seeks to liberate language from the fetters of race. I'm not sure about this fetters of race thing, but that Morrison wrote with the luster of poetry is an apt assessment. Not being a stupid child, encountering that poetry in the 1970s, coming face to face with true creative genius, put my own delusions of writing grandeur in perspective. Instead of struggling vainly and in vain to write the great American novel, it became my pleasure to read them and a privilege to become part of their interpretive community. I'm often asked to name my favorite Toni Morrison work, which is a little like asking a parent to single out a best-loved child. Morrison taught me how to use old language in new ways. One of her favorite words was voluptuous, not to describe a body as might be expected, but perhaps to describe a body of work, as in her writing is so voluptuous. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, they say, and I flattered Morrison a lot. Voluptuous became my favorite word, too. So when it comes to playing favorites, the most I can say is that I know of no more voluptuous use of language than Song of Solomon. And there is no more voluptuous critique of American letters than Playing in the Dark, Whiteness and the Literary Imagination. No more voluptuously piercing takedown of the canon than Unspeakable Things Unspoken. But if one were to read only a single work by Toni Morrison, let it be her exquisitely raceless narrative of race and class, Recitatif, her one and only published short story, a tour de force text so carefully drawn, tightly told, and voluptuously implotted that it needs no companion pieces to make the point that Toni Morrison is a master storyteller in any medium. Toni Morrison, here's to you, already much missed in all your voluptuousness.
I'm Kevin Quashie. I teach in the English department. The gifts Toni Morrison gave us are plenty and massive. They are ideological and philosophical and aesthetic. Massive, yes, and they also exist on the level of the glide and grace of a sentence. Here's one example from the narrator's confession at the very end of her novel, Jazz, a confession which admits that even though the narrator had predicted enduring doom for Joe and Violet's relationship, doom, in fact, didn't last. The passage runs a couple pages in the novel, but I'll read and highlight just the last bit, which is a thesis on love and surrender. Quote, I envy them their public love. I myself have only known it in secret, shared it in secret, and longed to show it, to be able to say out loud what they have no need to say at all. That I've loved only you, surrendered my whole self reckless to you and nobody else. That I want you to love me back and show it to me. That I love the way you hold me, how close you let me be to you. I like your fingers on and on, lifting, turning. I've watched your face for a long time now and missed your eyes when you went away from me. Talking to you and hearing you answer, that's the kick. But I can't say that aloud. I can't tell anyone that I've been waiting for this all my life and that being chosen to wait is the reason I can. If I were able, I'd say it. Say, make me, remake me. You are free to do it, and I am free to let you, because look, look where your hands are now. That's how the book ends. I wish I could show you the passage on screen, but let me repeat the part that I want to emphasize most. If I were able, I'd say it. Say, make me, remake me. You are free to do it, and I am free to let you, because look where your hands are now. That gorgeousness is full of repetition, which the poet Nikki Finney tells us is holy. And it is a particular kind of repetition, Chiasmus, the rhetorical trope where words or concepts are exchanged, as in the iconic example many of us might know from Frederick Douglass's narrative. You've seen how a man was made a slave, you shall see how a slave was made a man. Chiasmus is used in the Bible and in oral practices of telling because it enhances the capacity to understand. One can readily remember the chiasmic utterance. But I think chiasmus is also loved because it is transformative. The word chiasmus comes from the Greek or the Igbo or Chinese chai or ki, as in cross. Chiasmus is a calculus of inversion, where a thing is undone by its opposition, where a thing becomes abundant through incorporation and obliteration. Chiasmus is magical, spherical, it's pure magic itself. It's a spell in words, it's prayer, incorporation and obliteration, like love. Like make me, remake me, you are free to do it, and I'm free to let you. Toni Morrison knew the magic of this little technique of language, the way it appeals to the one telling the tale, as well as to the one listening. Toni Morrison, she who exemplified to us that words are magic. Human beings know this, but modernity and coloniality have ruined our relationship to such knowing. In the new world, then, it seems that it is writers and artists, Black ones especially, who are trying to hold on to this knowing. I want to say today that Toni Morrison was and is chiasmus. She implored us to pay attention so we could be moved toward some understanding that is both of us and still bigger than us. Just notice how that phrase from jazz has a second kind of magic in it. The narrator says, if I were able, I'd say it. An expression of the subjunctive and of a wish that the narrator in the very next sentence then manifests. It's pure magic. I could say so much more about this passage, including the beautiful pressure that Morrison's repetition puts on the words free and look. But I will say simply that Toni Morrison is chiasmus, that one of the gifts of Morrison's work is not only this attuned, exquisite writing that she left for us, but the generosity insinuated in the writing. It's very magic. The jazz chiasmus is what Morrison asked us to be able to say of and to ourselves, to say, make me, remake me. You are free to do it, and I'm free to let you, because look, look, look where your hands are now. Dear Toni Morrison, who remade the world for us. Dear, dear Toni Morrison, who was an artist, is chiasmus itself. Dear Miss Morrison, when James Baldwin died, you eulogized him, and the precision of your final 3 words, the 3 words you used then, I think are perfect for now, so I will borrow them. Dear, dear Toni Morrison, you crowned us. Thank you.
Fantastic. So we have 2 more elements to this celebration memorial. One is a performance by Akua Naru, who's going to perform her song Toni Morrison, which is going to definitely be a life-affirming experience, to say the least. And then we will have an open dialogue where everyone will be invited, led by Elmo Terry Morgan, to have what we call here in Rites and Reason and Africana a folk thought discussion. But first, join me in welcoming the CSREA artist in residence, dear friend and amazing poet and MC, Akua Naru.
Thank you. Can you hear me? All right, so I'm a little nervous because we're talking about Toni Morrison. But wrote a song about 5 years ago because I wanted to celebrate Toni Morrison. In the old church, we say, "Give me my roses now while I could still smell them." And so I wanted to give her her roses. I mean, we've given her so many, all of which she deserved and more. But it was a question, basically, which sort of was running through the song, where I said, how could one hand hold a pen, one pen hold a people? And the answer to that question is simple: Toni Morrison. So I just hit y'all with it like a chorus when I say, how could one hand hold a pen, one pen hold a people? The people say, how could one hand hold a pen, one pen hold a people? The people say, hey, how could one hand hold a pen, one pen hold a people? Oh my goodness. All right, you can play the music. I'm gonna try to do this. Can you turn it up? Used to wonder whose little girl am I? The fifth woman inside, banging some on her mama's old 45s. Who scored for the bluest side. Kept her on there tied until Pecola bore that burden of mine. Most vulnerable kind, black girl lost and confined. Double conscious outlined by the boys in his prime. Who heard us cry when the dawn told us black was a crime? Arrest your walk with that sword in your spine. Auction off tragic victim of time. Scepters of wine for memory. Collective genetic took you to write that simile. Inscribe the cage, find joy through the pain of Frankie Beverly. Trapped in a maze, made niggas and slaves, breeders and maids, made delay and made beds, spread legs, sweet masters entertainment, prescribed invisible lives till she reclaimed it, denied the white gaze, another brush to paint with. How could one hand hold the pen, one pen hold the people, y'all? How could one hand hold the pen, one pen hold the people? Come on. Look, I said, how could one hand hold the pen, one pen hold the people, y'all? Look. How could one hand? Listen, if you forget the music, remember the words. Now though the world was 3/5 and fractured, we whole. Main characters, female protagonists, centralized blackness. That tall baby, that jazz riff that came after. Shadrach, trauma when war left a shatter. A literary photograph captured. Born before the womb, it was you who learned our magic from Lorraine and under tonight for. Showed us that the bottom was the top, reimagined. EIU right with the hands of God. Layers for shots, convoys, Felicia Rasad. Reading your storm, moral resolve. Mother and daughter bonds braided and torn. Order chaos, Sula watched the burn from the front yard. Mother a metaphor, the height of Zeus be a lexicon. Song of Solomon, Psalms, Quran, our Pulitzer. Nobel Prize in human form, the living, the dead. She honored us all. Cause how could one hand hold the pen, one pen hold the people, y'all? Look, I said, how could one hand hold the pen, one pen hold the people, y'all? Look, how could one hand hold the pen, one pen hold the people? Come on. Hey, how could one hand hold the pen, one pen? Toni Morrison. I can't even finish the rest of the song. I'm just so. Oh my goodness. One hand, one pen. One people. Thank you all so much.